Hello, everybody. This is Jack Hammer of the Santa Rosa Press Democrat, and welcome to the 49ers Throwback Show. We do it every Tuesday. Jack Hammer here, and as I said, and my partner in crime always on Tuesday is Suneil Gitande from So Real Sports Talk TV. How you doing today, Suneil?
I'm doing great. I always get a kick out of your intro, Jack, because there's like so much of Debo grittying and playing in the background is just like hardcore rock music. It's like a complete like opposite spectrum of cultures mixing together, and it just for some reason it works on your channel. So I always get a big kick out of that.
Yeah. Well, trying to throw it back a little bit. You got a little bit of Montana, a little bit of Rice. You got a little bit of Lance, a little bit of Debo. It all works out together.
Before we start, I threw up a little throwback question on my Twitter. I said, who was your favorite 49er that was able to celebration? Who had your favorite 49er celebration? My choice was Merton Hanks. Who would be your choice, Jack?
I think that's a tough one to beat because that was a Super Bowl team as well in '94. It's the last one everybody remembers, obviously. And yeah, the chicken dance was one of those moves that just you can't really duplicate it. It was almost as bad as the Icky Shuffle, except for the 49ers won the Super Bowl.
Some other notables, T.O. obviously had some great ones, and then Deion Sanders obviously had his. Yes. So those are some other ones that people mentioned on there, but Merton Hanks definitely was it for me.
That's right. I think it was the first game for Deion Sanders at Candlestick Park against the New Orleans Saints. He'd opened his first game with the 49ers was down in LA against the Rams, but then the next week I think was his first home game against the Saints, and in the fourth quarter he picks off a pass along the right sidelines, returns it into the end zone, high stepping all the way, the crowd going crazy after booing it all those years. So yeah, absolutely, the Deion one was a good one as well.
I agree.
I don't really remember any other celebrations like really from the earlier days, like from the through the 80s and early 90s. I don't remember those teams really having any celebrations that stand out other than Dwight Clark spiking the ball after the catch.
Yeah, I mean it wasn't as prevalent. I think just in that day and age, it started getting more and more prevalent. As the years came on, and they were allowing it to be more prevalent, and people were more into star power and all that kind of stuff. But Merton Hanks to me wins just because his was created in San Francisco, as opposed to and I guess T.O.'s to a certain extent, but T.O. took his celebration to other teams. Deion, obviously his celebration started in Atlanta, and then, he was a Cowboy and brought it to the 49ers. Merton Hanks is like homegrown, authentic, only in 49er jersey was that created, so that's why I give a lot of props to him.
Yeah, absolutely. But you also have the John Taylor with the catch and spike between his legs in the Super Bowl when he beat the Bengals. I think he has another one where it's just a spike over his shoulder like that when he scores. So yeah, there's not a whole lot of fancy stuff before Deion and Merton and that group came along.
Right.
So there we go. And then as far as the new one, Tony jumps in and he has one. He says the DeForest Buckner sweep. After the sacks. Yeah.
I mean, Art Armstead has a great one. Bosa has a great one, I think. And obviously the receivers take it to another level with their dancing in the end zone and stuff like that. So now everybody has their own signature type thing, but Merton Hanks to me is the one that sticks out because nobody's copying it either. You know what I mean? Like everybody does the gritty now. So who do you really attribute the gritty to? Merton Hanks. He's the only person doing that dance and continues to do it because you got to have a lot of net flexibility to be able to do that. Like you could definitely kill yourself doing that dance with the type of force he put into snapping his neck back. So you definitely have to have some coordination and some strong neck muscles to pull that dance off.
That's true. It's too bad that Mike Glennon wasn't better because he would have really been able to pull that off as well.
Right.
But just kind of get into some of the topics that we want to talk about. We're kind of into a little bit of a dead period. We're in a lull now between we had a lot of stuff to talk about for the last 4 weeks between rookie minicamp, OTAs, and then the mandatory minicamp last week. Now we've got about 6 weeks before the team reconvenes for the start of training camp. So it's going to be an interesting period as we kind of look through. I think right now we're kind of getting to a period where this is where if you're the 49ers, the people in charge and John Lynch and so on, you get a little nervous because now the guys are going to be off on their own, right? And so now they're kind of left to their own devices, and you're hoping that you don't get those phone calls late at night that somebody screwed up.
Yeah, I mean, and one good thing about this team and this organization, you know, over the last however many years, when it comes to at least off the field type issues, they've done a really good job bringing in high character individuals. I think that the leadership on the team is strong. I think the camaraderie amongst the team is really strong. So all of that stuff I don't think they have much to worry about. I guess the biggest issue is just injuries. That's been kind of what has always been the Achilles heel for the 49ers, is someone going off and maybe possibly getting an injury from overworking, right? So it's kind of interesting, right? Usually some teams have an issue getting guys to come into camp with game shape and come into camp, you know, ready to go. Whereas, you know, sometimes the 49ers get into trouble because their guys work out too much and come you know, get these nicked up injuries and stuff like that. So it's going to be interesting to see. Hopefully everybody could come in healthy and they could stay relatively healthy throughout the season.
Yeah, you know, the thing is they've done a pretty good job of getting guys, other than the first year that this regime was in place when they had the issues with the linebacker. They've also been able to get guys who stay out of trouble. So that's a key piece of it as well. And as I was mentioning on my show yesterday with Rob, they're going into this offseason healthy, relatively healthy. They have some question marks around McGlinchey and Javon Kinlaw and Azeez Al-Shir, but you know, all these guys are rehabbing some stuff. They expect them to be ready to go, if not day one of training camp early on. So I think the Ferns are in a pretty good position here. I know when we were talking about what we were going to discuss on the show today, it was a little bit more offense heavy, though. It was specifically around the offensive line and the running game. You know, when you look at the 49ers going into 2022 with Trey Lance as the starting quarterback, do you see an offense that's going to be maybe a little bit more run first, you know, utilizing that inside run game maybe a little bit more?
Well, I mean, definitely run first, right? Any Kyle Shanahan team is going to be run first. Kyle Shanahan's led offenses are always in the bottom 5 of pass attempts per game. And that's even when he had, you know, the MVP year with Matt Ryan over there in Atlanta. So they're definitely going to be a run first. Any coach with the last name Shanahan believes the run sets up the rest of the offense. So they're going to be run first. What's interesting is that you mentioned the inside rushing attack. And when you look at the strength of this offensive line, Jack, you wouldn't say that inside is the strength. However, with the type of running backs that they've brought in, it leads you to think that that is going to be kind of what it is. Because for the first time, I think Kyle Shanahan basically has 4 or 5 clones of the same type of skill set, build, and you know, size overall of a running back, and they tend to be between the tackles type runners, not necessarily have that track speed to break away from people like a Mostert or a Matt Breida had in previous years. So it seems like, at least based off of just the personnel, that it is going to be a more power running style between the tackles, right up the middle type rushing attack, which to me is a little bit of a question mark, because when you look at the inside of the offensive line, it seems like probably Jake Brendel will be the starting center, which it would be his first time ever as a full-time starter. Obviously, Aaron Banks, looking like he's going to be the left guard. He's going to be a first-time starter. And then you have Brunskill, who has been a starter at right guard, but isn't necessarily, I mean, from last year, out of the 5 offensive linemen, he'd be the 5th best offensive lineman kind of thing. So the strength of it isn't in that interior of the offensive line. The strengths obviously are their tackles. So yeah, I mean, based off of personnel, I would expect them to be running more up the middle, power rushing style, but that doesn't necessarily fit with what I would guess is their strength. What about you?
I look at it a little bit differently. I think Daniel Brunskill, when it comes to the run game, he's strong in the run game. I think he struggles a little bit in the past. Some of that is not having Mike McGlinchey there last year to line up next to him. Some of that is the weakness, the issues that they had at center, and they're bouncing around a little bit there in 2020. So I think Brunskill gets undersold a little bit. Is he a top level right guard in the NFL? No, but I think he's better than people. A lot of people around the 49ers give him credit for, talking with the people that are talking 49ers. But yeah, the Brendel thing at center is a question mark. We don't know enough about him to know if he's going to be able to generate that push up front. Aaron Banks, I think he's going to be okay. That's one of the things that he was really good at Notre Dame was his ability to get off the ball and drive people in the run game and pass protect. So I think Banks is going to be okay. A little question mark there at center for me. But I definitely, based on the personnel that they have together, I would expect to see more runs between the tackles. That's what they built.
And you're much better at the X's and O's and all that kind of stuff. Running down the middle, what role do the tackles play in that? Because clearly, and not necessarily underselling Brunskill, but what I meant to say is he's not considered. I wouldn't say he's like the strength of the offensive line, right? Obviously, the strength is going to be the left tackle and the right tackle with McGlinchey and Williams. But how do the tackles play a role when it comes to the interior run? Like, how are you able to utilize, that strength if you're running down the middle more often?
It just really depends on the run that you're doing. And because it could be a situation where those guys, maybe their responsibility, it's an inside run, but their job is to block down and they're coming crushing down on a linebacker, and that's going to open up the cutback lane, those kind of things. So it just really depends on the type of run that you're calling. You can, and where it's going up the middle. You have your ISO, which is, they're not going to really be involved in an ISO run. That's where you're isolating the running back usually on a linebacker, and everybody's kind of opening that up. There could be, on like a power run, then your tackles are blocking down. That's a little bit more off tackle. You can run a wall play, which is similar to a power, except for it's off guard instead of off tackle. That one's trying to remember how that is, but I think that's a little bit more just blocking out because of the way that you're lined up. So it just really depends. And then when they run their zone run game, if they're running inside zone, those types of things, the backside tackle is important because he's got to be able to get upfield and get to the second level to get to wash the linebackers all the way for the cutback lanes. So
yeah,
this really depends.
Yeah, and I mean, it's going to be interesting because each lineman that they have has a different strength, right? And when it comes to Jake Brendel, let's say, for example, him, clearly he's been getting a lot of praise this offseason. I think they tend to do that when they know, somebody new is going to be coming in. But I don't necessarily think they're just blowing smoke. Like when a guy like Trent Williams gives the kind of glowing admiration he's been giving to a guy like Jake Brendel, I think that I believe when Williams says what he says, that he's speaking from authenticity and not just trying to hype up a teammate. But from what we know, obviously, we haven't seen too much of Brendel, but from all indications, he's a very athletic offensive lineman. So you would assume that maybe his strength is going to be more being able to get people on that next line, right? Maybe not necessarily all the strength right at the line, but his ability to move and, like you said, maybe pull and do things like that can help the interior. But when you look at Aaron Banks, that's not his strength, right? When he has to be athletic, it tends to be where he is weaker. He's more right at the line, like being able to use his hands and use his technique rather than his athleticism. I think Brendel is different, where he's more athleticism than necessarily technique. I don't know how you would gauge Brunskill. I would assume he's maybe a hybrid of both. But yeah, so that's why it's kind of interesting, because who do you use to pull? Who do you use, to stand stationary type of thing? I think is going to be a good challenge for Anthony Lynn and Kyle Shanahan to really devise some schemes that plays to the strengths of their offensive line. And to be honest, both of those guys do a really good job always coming up with a very good rushing attack, no matter who their backs are, no matter who's their offensive lineman.
Yeah, and we've seen the 49ers like last year be able to run some of their stuff where they're pulling guys. It's not counter Trey because it's not the guard and tackle pulling, but like a counter Trey type of a thing where they run it, and it's George Kittle and Kyle Juszczyk who are the guys that are pulling. One guy kicking it, the other guy's leading up the hole, which gives you a little more blockers on the backside than typically you get in that run, because typically you have your backside guard and tackle are the ones that are pulling and kicking, and so by doing that, you're just putting more men in the box to bust it open. And the 49ers have some unique abilities to do things like that because of the versatility of a guy like Kyle Juszczyk in particular. So it'll be interesting to see how they incorporate all of what they do into the run game. I think that kind of leads to the question: are we going to see more shotgun from the 49ers with Trey Lance than what we've seen in the past? There was a lot made out of Trey Lance and the number of snaps that he took from under center at North Dakota State. But he also had quite a bit from the shotgun. His numbers were under center were much higher than the rest of the guys in his draft class, but that's primarily because in college nowadays you almost never see the quarterback under center. Do you think we're going to see a more shotgun-oriented attack for the 49ers?
I mean, I think it's a definite possibility. I think Kyle Shanahan's going to be open to any kind of wrinkle. I mean, there's the benefits, I guess, of the shotgun is it obviously gives the quarterback a little more time than going under center. It obviously gives different look to the defense and maybe makes it a little bit easier on the quarterback as far as reading what the defense is going to do and things of that nature. Also, it's easier for a quarterback that's mobile to be able to run, on called running plays or even, scrambles when you have that room to kind of see, what the defensive line and the linebackers are going to do. So I think that there's some benefits that it might help Trey early on if things are getting difficult, maybe move back into the shotgun to be able to maybe slow down the game a little bit for him if Kyle Shanahan is seeing that maybe he's, the game's moving too fast. But I think I kind of tend to agree with what you've been kind of stating throughout the whole offseason and even last year, Jack. You were saying, I don't think that this offense is going to change too much. All that's going to change is basically the choices that Trey makes, right? He's probably more inclined to take some of those deeper routes and actually throw some of those balls that Jimmy was maybe not as keen to throw to or wasn't as confident in his arm to be able to throw to. I think Trey will be able to do that, but I would imagine we're going to probably see pretty much the same type of designs. And if everything is going well, I would assume that it's probably going to be Trey under center because it seems like that's the way Kyle Shanahan likes to, play his game.
Yeah, no, I get you. And that's one of the things. It's going to be interesting because I do think that the 49ers offense will be at its best if they just kind of stick with the Jimmy Garoppolo game plan in terms of the types of things that they're looking to do. And when I say Jimmy Garoppolo game plan, I'm not saying we're just going to dink and dunk or the 49ers just, I'm talking you're but within their offense in the passing game, they have all the areas opened up. I just don't want to see Lance used as a running back very often, but I could see them coming out and using maybe a little bit more shotgun to get him a little bit better view, keep him so he's not having to necessarily turn his back on the defense quite as much in the play action game. And also I could see them using that maybe early on to help open up the running game because of the threat that Trey Lance gives on those inside, those handoffs out of the gun.
Yeah, I mean, do you think it would be something they come out straight out the gate for, or they something they move to if plan A isn't working? Like, do you expect it to be a plan A type thing or a plan B if plan A isn't working?
I just kind of think that there's going to be a little bit more emphasis on the inside running game this year than what we've seen in the past. Typically, last year, with Elijah Mitchell, he was okay in the middle, but he was better when it was off tackle or a toss to the outside. He wasn't really all that great in between the tackles. He was okay at times, but it was Usually when we saw him was either a toss to the outside that was kind of like a toss to get into the outside zone, where it was really their inside zone, but they used the toss to get there to kind of get them to the edge a little quicker. Those types of things. But with the backs that they've gone to, I don't see Tyrion Davis-Price being a guy that's going to be running in a lot of outside zone. I don't know if even if Trey Sermon's a guy that's going to give you a lot of outside zone. So I think you're going to see more downhill running in between the tackles, maybe in between the tight ends and in the box kind of runs than what we've seen in the past from the 49ers this year. Just the way that they've set this up, I think the power that you get with Aaron Banks at left guard and the running backs and the way that where they're best, it just kind of seems to fit a little bit of a change with their running scheme.
Yeah, I agree. I think definitely the personnel that they brought in as far as running backs, more than what they do have on the offensive line, leads me to believe that they are going to be doing more between, in that interior offensive line versus, as much on the outside. So it's going to be interesting to see. As far as going back to your shotgun type thing, obviously when we saw the last mobile quarterback that the 49ers had, which was probably Cap, they did more of like that pistol, which really played to his strengths as far as, being able to be use his athleticism, and give him some more time and things of that nature. Can you talk about, I guess, why, especially when you're talking about like a mobile quarterback, like a Colin Kaepernick, like a Lamar Jackson in Baltimore, and even guys like Josh Allen in Buffalo and stuff like that? What's the benefit of starting somebody in that shotgun, especially when they have the ability to run like a guy like Trey Lance? People are mentioning as well. Even though I don't believe Trey Lance is a run-first quarterback, he obviously has the ability to run. What is the benefit of moving somebody into shotgun for people that may not, understand the X's and O's as well as you do?
You mean you're talking like moving Trey Lance into the shotgun?
Or just a quarterback in general that usually guys that have that dual threat as a quarterback tend to play more in shotgun than, just pure pocket passers.
Yeah, because it depends. Like when you're doing it at the lower levels, you put them into the shotgun because you want to make them become more part of the running game, right? So like for example, if I had a quarterback that I wanted to run the ball with a lot, I would put him in the shotgun because then at that point I'm playing 11 on 11. He is a running back / quarterback because you can use your other, if you want to have only one back in the backfield with them, he is your running back and your other running back kind of becomes your fullback, and you can run everything in your offense around it. It just, if you're depending on what you're looking to do, and you see that in the college game quite a bit. Quarterbacks are almost never under center in college anymore. If you watch major college football, they're almost always in the shotgun. Part of that is to get them to become part of the running game. Part of that is to help them not have to really. It helps with from the standpoint of it's less things to have to teach these guys. I'm talking about the lower levels, not in the NFL right now. But like if you're coaching in high school and college, and you're running everything out of the shotgun, you're never really having to teach a guy how to run a 5 and 7 step drop because they're always in the gun, and everything out of that is usually a 3-step drop of some sort, or a play action fake, which then is a short drop or a rollout. So you're not having to have quite as much of that. There's some things you don't have to teach because they're not utilizing those skills anymore. And when you get into the NFL, I think like for a guy like Trey Lance, or we saw it even with Robert Griffin III when he was with Kyle Shanahan out in Washington, you're utilizing those guys as part of the running game to some extent. And by putting them in the shotgun, now you have the zone read as an option. So every time that they hand off, there is a threat of them running the ball, whether it's by design or not. There's a threat of them keeping it. So it freezes a side of the defense a little bit more. So if I'm running zone read and I'm reading the right side, and the back's going to the left, I'm slowing down that back side because if that guy he's either going to come up the field and get the quarterback, right, or he has to kind of slow play it as I'm doing the handoff and try to get down the line of scrimmage because he's got to contain the quarterback. So I can take a couple of guys out of the defense by running some of the run plays out of the shotgun that I wouldn't be able to take out of the defense if I'm running with them under center. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's kind of what I was hoping that you would answer with. So what it does is it obviously simplifies things for the quarterback because now there's less for them to read. They're only reading like, especially if it's like a run play, they're probably looking at one linebacker. If they come in, then that they'll hand if they bite down, then they might take off with it. If they kind of read the quarterback, then they'll hand it to the running back, which makes it easier for that. But what are, I guess, some of the negatives of playing shotgun? Like in the sense, who does it stress more? Like maybe guys on the offensive line maybe have to make tougher blocks, or what does it limit as far as opportunity for the offensive side playing out of the shotgun? Like how would it be a negative if the 49ers did play more shotgun?
The negative thing that I think of when you're running out of the shotgun is that you kind of lose the ability to run some of the counters with the back himself. You kind of, when you're on the defensive side, if you're focusing on the running back, you can kind of tell if he's lined up on the right side, he's pretty much either going to go to the center or left, right? Because there's not very often where they get the ball and then head up back the other way. You just don't see it all that often. You don't see things like the counters and those things quite so much. When you're running the ball out under center, it kind of opens up all of the field to you, either direction that way. But when you're doing it out of the gun, it kind of limits that a little bit. But that's where the running back piece of it comes into play.
Yeah, I mean, it limits the types of runs, but does it add any stress to certain? So, like, usually I feel like whenever you look at a scheme, right, it'll benefit some things, but it also take away from other things. Like, is it harder for offensive linemen to play in shotgun than if the quarterback was under center? Is it harder for receivers? Does it take away certain looks in the pass / run game where it makes it easier maybe for a defense when people are in shotgun? Like, can you talk a little bit about maybe what those negatives would be?
I don't know if I can say that there's really any negatives for the offensive side. Like I said, the only one is it kind of limits where the running back can go. But the way that offenses are, it doesn't matter you can, if you line up in a certain way and you see defenses lining up, then you need to have the plays off of that. So if I line up in a shotgun, this one formation in particular, say for example, and maybe they're overplaying to the left side of our offense, they're right. Then I need to have something that's going to come off that's going to take advantage of that on the backside. So we don't really ever see, like with Kyle Shanahan's offense and all these offenses in the NFL, they're built where they have enough things to come off it where if a defense is overplaying a certain area, you should be able to take advantage of it in another space by, just with your play calls and things that you can use to come off of it.
Right. And, obviously there's more, I guess one negative could be there's more of an opportunity for that center quarterback transition. Like you see a lot more fumbles in shotgun than, under center usually. But that wasn't necessarily the case for Jimmy and Alex Mack early on in the season. But usually, that shotgun, the shotgun, hike from the center can sometimes be an issue, especially if there's some kind of timing routes and things like that.
Well, we've seen that with the 49ers, right? We saw that I remember, one instance in particular, it was in 2019 where, the 49ers, they like to snap the ball at, different points. And if you remember against the Steelers, they snapped the ball and hit the guy in motion and and the Steelers recovered it deep in their own territory on one drive in that game. So we've seen the 49ers have some issues with the snaps from shotgun and the timing and those types of things. We'll see how it works out. I mean, the one benefit to Alex Mack not being back with the 49ers in 2022, if there is one, was that the quarterbacks aren't going to be receiving a wet ball this year. I mean, that's a plus.
Right. We won't have to be. There won't be perspiration gate.
That's right. That's right. And then I guess that kind of leads us. We're talking a lot about the running game today, and before we get off of that and go to the pass, who do you think, with the way that this roster is constructed right now, who do you think will be the 49ers leading rusher in 2022?
Now, obviously, all of this is going to be contingent on health, because obviously, if any of these guys get injured, that's going to play a role. But let's say everybody's healthy, Jack, that's how I'm going to answer the question. I still think it's going to be Elijah Mitchell, just because Shanahan seems to trust certain people over other people. One thing about Elijah Mitchell is the guy never fumbles, right? He didn't fumble at all in college. He didn't fumble at all last season. And I think that's a skill when you're that good with the ball with as many reps as Mitchell is able to take. Now, I don't think he's going to be able to carry the type of load that he was able to carry last season. Obviously, it led to injuries for him. So I hope that they don't give him 20, 25 carries like it seemed like they were doing last season, closer to maybe that 15 to 18 mark, and then let TDP and, Trey Sermon or whoever else is in that running back room take some of those carries away. But I still think Elijah Mitchell is going to be the leading rusher, just because, one, he's proven in this system he can be effective, and two, he doesn't fumble the ball. And I think those are two important aspects to Kyle Shanahan. And even though he tends to go with the hot back, like the guy that's hot at the moment, I think he also plays to guys that he trusts. And I think Elijah Mitchell is somebody that he trusts.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a trust factor with Mitchell. He holds on to the ball, doesn't put it on the ground very often, and so I definitely think that you're right.
You froze out a little bit, Jack. You froze out a little bit. You might want to start over.
I'm good. Yeah. So real quick, what I was saying was, Mitchell is a guy who doesn't put the ball in the ground a lot. So I think that there's some trust there with him from Kyle Shanahan, and the issues that, he had some games with a lot of carries last year. He had 207 carries. But he only played 11 games. That's a lot of carries for that amount of games. So I think you're gonna see them try to maybe limit him to around 200, that same number, 207, because that's still 12 carry game if that's how many he has. And we saw that he was almost over 1,000 yards this year. So if he's in that 200 to 220 range, I think that'll be good. And then you have these other guys that can pick up the load. I do think that Mitchell likely is the leading running back for the 49ers. I'm interested to see how this plays out, because I think you're going to see some really tight battles in camp. Jeff Wilson Jr. looked good during OTAs. He had a couple of explosive runs, looked explosive on a couple of his runs. And obviously I keep talking up the undrafted, Jordan Mason, the undrafted rookie free agent, because of his speed and the things that he's showing. So it's going to be an interesting room, to say the least, and see because they're not going to carry 5 running backs. And right now they have 5 guys, not including the undrafted rookie free agent. So it's going to be interesting to see how that room shakes out when it's all said and done.
Yeah. And one thing with Elijah Mitchell is he was nursing an injury throughout the season. I don't think he was, fully healthy for the majority of the season. And you were somebody who was on Elijah Mitchell before anybody else, as far as saying, this guy has some explosion. He's been impressive when you were watching training camp last season. That's one thing that I think will be an added benefit to this rushing attack is even though Elijah Mitchell maybe doesn't have Raheem Mostert type explosion, he does have a lot more explosion than I think he was able to utilize last season because of, the lingering issues to his, was it knees and I think it was like a foot injury or knee injury, but yeah, so lessening his load, I think, can actually increase his production because he will be able to stay more fresh and keep that explosion, which I think, will benefit the team overall. Because I do hope that they can find explosion out of the running back room so they don't have to rely on Debo and maybe Ray McLeod coming back there to be their explosive, rushing attack. I hope that they could just get that enough out of the rushing attack from the running backs. And, even though you mentioned George Mason, I still think Elijah Mitchell is going to be option number 1 for that.
Yeah, I think he is too. I know I was on a stream last week and I said Mason, but you're right. I think it's going to be Mitchell most likely. it's like I said, I don't know for sure. I just think this room's going to be interesting to watch because there's just so many guys back there. So it's hard to really pinpoint one or the other in that room because you're just not sure how it's going to shake out right now. And like you said, Mitchell's coming back from a knee, dealt with that towards the second half of the year over throughout the playoffs and stuff when his numbers were down a little bit. So it's going to be fun to watch how that room comes together. Going back to the interior of the offensive line, though, since that was kind of our focus in the beginning, what do you think, or do you think that interior offensive line is going to be able to hold up enough to give Trey Lance the opportunity to find his receivers and be a playmaker and do those types of things that you're looking for?
I mean, the answer, unfortunately, might be a cop-out, is I would hope so. Because obviously, unfortunately, we don't know. Like, I could sit here and say confidently yes, but I would be just saying it because clearly 60% of that offense, that interior offensive line, Jack, we haven't seen play in meaningful games in the NFL because, Brendel, for as much highly praised he is on this team, he's been cut by 5 teams in his whole career, one of them being the 49ers. And, he's only started 3 games. Not all of those games were necessarily at center. So we don't know what really he's capable of throughout a 17 game regular season. Same with Aaron Banks. We project that he will do well, but we haven't seen, he was injured last season. We haven't seen how he's held up. Now, the things that I can say in positives is Aaron Banks definitely looked like he's been working a lot this offseason and becoming, and coming in better shape. He obviously still has a lot of size, but is able to lose some body fat, which shows that he's been in the weight room and really working, which is, I think, a great sign. The thing that I hang my hat on, Jack, is trust in this in the coach. And I was telling Jesse last week, I know you and Jesse had me kind of wavering on my Shanistan kind of momentum, and I'm back to fully being a Shanistan again. I know you guys had me on the fence a little bit last season, but I just trust. Look, for all the things that people are mentioning, it's not like Kyle Shanahan isn't a football brain and doesn't understand how important it is for him to have a good unit at offensive line for his offense to be successful, especially with offense that's surrounded around rushing the ball very well, and then also having a very young quarterback that's going to be a full-time starter for the first time. Having a good unit there is going to be important. So knowing that, for me to see that they didn't put in more, I guess, draft capital in getting, a premium interior offensive lineman in this draft or in the, through free agency either, leads me to believe that they feel like they had those answers already on the roster. So I would assume that they believe that these guys are going to be able to hold up. So I believe that they'll be able to hold up, Jack.
Yeah, you bring up the Kyle Shanahan stuff, and for me with Kyle Shanahan, one of my biggest knock on him has always been the inconsistency of his offenses. One year it's good, the next year it's not. He's never been able to put back-to-back big years together. His offenses haven't been top half of the league in scoring very often, those types of things. And really I think it's the biggest knock with him is his in-game management. At times he gets away from things that are working. He lost 2 Super Bowls in part because I feel like he got a little too cute with his play calling. He lost the NFC Championship game, I think, in part because he got away from his best player, never went to him. At the same time, 2021, for me, I gained some respect for Kyle Shanahan in terms of his ability to keep these guys playing and his ability to keep them playing throughout the season, because it's 3-6, or 3-5, whatever. They're 3-5. At 3-5 and 4-6, those two, that's where they were. Those were pretty dire straits. That, at 3-5, I remember walking out of the press box at Levi's saying they're done. This team just doesn't have it. then they go on to win a couple of games, they get back to 500, and so on, and they end up going through. And he was able to keep that team together. So I think Kyle Shanahan deserves a lot of credit for his ability to keep the team together and get his guys to buy in. He just needs to be able to. He needs to be able to stick with what works. I think he gets away from it sometimes. Now, to the question at hand, I know I'm kind of going long here, but the question at hand is, can the interior offensive line hold up for Trey Lance? And I think the answer to that's going to be yes. I don't think the 49ers' success this season is going to depend on the play of their offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, clearly, and you mentioned the inconsistencies in Shanahan's offense, and I think that leads to where I think his biggest and where I think his most reasonable criticism and most game criticism of anybody that wants to criticize Kyle Shanahan is his lack of investment in the quarterback room. I think that he hasn't had sound backups to be able to spell, anytime their starter went down. And it's not like any team really has a quality backup to the point where if your starter has a season-ending injury that you're still going to be able to be competitive. Nobody really has that unless, you find like a diamond in the rough kind of thing. But nobody really plans for having your starter have a season-ending injury and still be able to be in contention for playoffs or Super Bowl. But the level of drop-off from the starting caliber quarterback that the 49ers have had, which was only Jimmy Garoppolo, to, a Nick Mullins or a CJ Beathard, was just night and day, right? And last season, because they had a guy like Trey that they invested in, even when Jimmy went out for a few games, Trey was able to step into a must-win game against Houston and be able to go out and get that victory, so that the 49ers playoff hopes were still alive. And I think that that's probably where more of their inconsistency have come from, Jack. I know you mentioned the play calling, but I also think that just the talent that was there playing quarterback wasn't as high. It could be another question mark this year, right? Because I don't know if Nate Sudfeld or Brock Purdy are the guys that could come in if Trey misses one or two games to still be able to be competitive. I don't know that. So maybe it's another issue that the 49ers need to look at. But I agree with you. I don't think if the 49ers are not a successful team this year, it's going to be because of the offensive line. It's going to be overall the play of Trey Lance at quarterback.
Yeah, exactly. And that's my feeling on it. You look at this team, when they've had a quarterback that's been, and they've had decent quarterback play, they've been good, right? 2017, when Jimmy Garoppolo showed up, they won 5 games. When he was there in 2018, it was a little bit of a mixed bag. We don't really know how that was going to turn out because it only lasted two games and 3 quarters, and we don't know. 2019, the team was fixed up. Jimmy Garoppolo was played the whole season. They were good. I think in 2020, I think 2020 is the season to point to, because that's a team in 2020. They were a playoff team if they just get positive play out of the quarterbacks. Jimmy Garoppolo goes down, and so that leads people to say, well, they didn't have good center play, they didn't have good guard play, and he got, they got the quarterback injured, right? But the guy that got injured wasn't the issue. It was the left guard. Laken Tomlinson is the guy that gave up the hit against the Jets that injured Jimmy Garoppolo. It wasn't the backup at center. It wasn't Daniel Brunskill over at right guard. It was the guy that everybody's worried about trying to replace now. So, and even with that, even with the musical chairs that they had at center, and because of the musical chairs at center, it also impacted right guard a little bit because Brunskill had to slide over. They only gave up 39 sacks in 16 games in 2020. The Cincinnati Bengals just went to the Super Bowl, and they gave up 55. The Tennessee Titans had the best record in the AFC, and they gave up 47, and the 49ers only had 39. So when you look at that on a per game basis with sacks and those types of things, I think the 49ers will be fine. And it's all, like you said, and I've been saying it for a while, it's all going to come down to what Trey Lance does.
Yeah, and another thing, I mean, when you mentioned teams like the Bengals and even, the Titans, they're able to their offense is able to move the ball down the field and not be stagnant, right? They have, obviously the Titans have, one of the best running backs in the game and Derrick Henry, and they have, some really elite wide receivers last season. Obviously Joe Burrow has an amazing receiver core there and, a great running back in Mixon as well. And their offense was very potent. That's going to be key, right? We've mentioned it. I think that if this offense struggles as much as it struggled last season, because in my eyes it did, right? It was a very inconsistent consistency. And what I mean by that is they were consistently inconsistent, meaning they scored points all at the same time. There was very few games where they consistently scored in every single quarter. It was either like right at the end of the half and then, into the third and, sometimes in the fourth. So their ability to put up scores in every single quarter, Jack, I think is going to be more important than, anything else in my eyes. If they can just stay balanced and put together a full 4 quarters of football, that's going to be very, very key to the success of this team. And I think that they have the talent to do it. It's just about whether or not they're going to execute.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think they have enough, and Kyle Shanahan has shown the ability to scheme around his offensive linemen to an extent. And you can't always do it, but I think he's shown the ability to be successful without having the elite, guys all over the place. And the Flyers put an emphasis more on tackle than they do in the middle. I just feel like that this is a team that's going to be successful, and it's going to come down to Lance, and they have the playmakers. This team's could be, if they have playmakers at all the spots. Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk are really good on the outside. Throw in Juwan Jennings, who everybody is pointing to, and Jennings looked really good during mini camp this last week, which is coming off of a really strong second half of the season last year. You've got George Kittle there to help him out. You've got, we just talked about it. We have 6 running backs on the roster right now that you would expect that could be on any given team in the NFL during the regular season. So the offensive side is stacked. You look at the defensive side. You have Nick Bosa, and look what Nick Bosa has done for guys. He's gotten big. He's gotten big contracts for some defensive linemen because he allows them to go one-on-one. And then Jimmy Ward in the back, on the back end. Fred Warner in the middle. Traveris Ward now out at corner. This is a stacked team, and they just need for Trey Lance to be better than Nick Mullins and CJ Beathard. I don't know if that's too much to ask.
Yeah, I don't think it's too much to ask. And, this team could literally have over 40% of their starters, Jack, be Pro Bowlers this year. That's how talented this team is, right? They could easily have, 8 to 10 players be Pro Bowl starters. That's how talented and deep this team is. So, yeah, they have all of that. And, I think that you're right. I mean, if Trey Lance could just be average, this team will be a playoff team. If he can be great or good, I would say, let's say average then good, this team is probably in contention for a Super Bowl. If he could play great, Jack, this team is probably the favorite. I don't think if they get great quarterback play, I don't think there's a team that stacks up on paper with the 49ers as far as the depth, the star power, and just overall, now all of a sudden a team that was that had very little playoff experience, now it's probably one of the more experienced playoff teams because this core unit has stayed together and been through 2 deep playoff runs at this time. So everything is pointing for the 49ers to really be able to take that next step. And like we both are saying, it's all lynched on how Trey Lance is going to play. Average, I think they make the playoffs. Good, I think they are a contender. Great, I think they're the favorite.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun because from everything that I've seen so far, Trey Lance, he looks really good. And I know that people might not like this, but their offense hasn't taken a snap a step back yet. It was very Jimmy Garoppolo-esque in terms of hitting the throws underneath and being willing to take the check downs and those types of things. He does push the ball downfield and did push the ball downfield a little bit more during the OTAs. There was, it goes all over the field with him, and that's part of what you like, right? That was kind of what we talked about. It's funny because I'd gone on a stream during the OTAs. I think it was the first day, and I was talking about how they were really working underneath, and he was showing some struggles with the deep ball, wasn't throwing it very well. The next day, what do you know? 2 deep balls for touchdowns. I think the 49ers were also smart in that they flipped it around. So instead of having him throw against the wind, they had him throw in with the wind. So little things like that, right? So they definitely they have the quarterback, I think, to get it done. I know we haven't seen him play more than 2 games, but I have a lot of faith, I guess, based off of what I've seen so far, that he's going to look good. And I'm looking forward to seeing him play, and I'm looking forward to being able to break his play down and do the same thing that we've done with every other quarterback that's come through here the last 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, each game he's looked better. You can't say that, from this time we saw him to in the future we saw him that he's taken steps back in this aspect. And I think that injury that he was nursing all season is definitely something that played a role in some of the things that he was fairly criticized on, which was maybe some of his accuracy and things of that nature. But, having a healthy finger, having a full season underneath his belt, having the reins pretty much, given to him without any competition necessarily, I think all of that bodes well. The way he's handled himself this offseason is everything you want out of your starting quarterback, from, the amount of work that we've seen him put in with a multitude of coaches, to the leadership that he's shown from putting together workouts with, the players that are on the team, as well as reaching out to the rookies and new guys that are coming in, to the way he's been able to handle the media. I mean, this guy has really done everything in an A+ kind of range, you would say, at this point, right? Now it's just, obviously the pads haven't gone on. Obviously it hasn't been full speed practices. When we see that, that's going to be the real key. Okay, everything else that's controllable that he's been able to show, he's hit it out of the park. Now it's like the next level. Okay, let's see when he has to go through some challenges, when he's lining up against the what I would think is going to be a top 5 defense in pads going full speed. Is he able to still look as good? If the answer is yes there, then I think you got the favorite in the NFC with the 49ers.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to watch. They have a tough schedule. That's going to play into it as well. But so do the Rams and everybody else in the NFC West. That's a tough go with this year with the AFC West being on the schedule. But it's going to be interesting to watch. I'm looking forward to seeing Trey Lance out there and seeing how he progresses and moves forward. So.
And everybody's looking at the 49ers as one of their toughest matchups too. Like, it's not like it's just the 49ers. Like, I don't think too many people are looking at the 49ers and are excited that they have to play them, because they're going to be a very physical team. They obviously have a lot, defenses have a lot of things to pay attention to the offensive side, and offenses have a lot of issues to deal with on their defensive side. So, that's what it is. The 49ers are definitely one of the favorites, I think, to win the Super Bowl. The only reason why I think they get so much slander when it comes to the rankings and all that kind of stuff is because Trey Lance is unknown. And when he stops becoming an unknown, those power rankings are going to change very, very quickly if he starts showing out the way that we all expect him to.
Yeah, when you start to look at the way that people are breaking them down, yeah, you've got the unknown of Lance. You've got the unknowns along the offensive line, and most people are looking at that as a negative and not looking at the track record of Kyle Shanahan over the last 3 years and the full roster that they put together, which is really what you're getting at, right? Because the full team helps you overcome some of those things, those things that you're not totally sure of, but you can kind of get a good idea that they're going to be okay. So, yeah, it's going to be fun. I think the 49ers are going to be a playoff team. We'll get into more of that over the next few weeks as we head into training camp. Really quick before I let you go, what are some things that you've got coming up over on your channel?
Yeah, so tomorrow I do my regular show with Rohan Chakravarti from 49ers Web Zone. That'll be at 7 o'clock tomorrow. But I'm just thinking, I don't know, do the Warriors play tomorrow?
No, they do not.
They don't. It's Thursday, right?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, so we'll still do that on tomorrow, and then Thursday probably nothing because the Warrior game. Maybe something on Friday or into the weekend. We'll see, but immediately right after this, going on with your boy Jesse from Hammer and Nails. So I'm gonna be on Last Second Sports. So if you want to see more of me, go over to Last Second Sports, and we'll be continuing 49er conversation over there with Jesse.
There you go. Perfect. So if you're watching the show and you're liking what Suneil has to say, get over to So Real Sports Talk TV and make sure that you're checking that out. Get yourself subscribed over there. But before you leave, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button. And also make sure you hit the little bell notification so you know when we go live all the time. That's the key there. And then also make 49ers.pressdemocrat.com a favorite on your web browser so that you don't miss any of the exciting content over there as well with all the writing that I'm doing. Right now with we're kind of in that lull period, it's going to slow down just a little bit, but it's going to be definitely busy come the end of July when we get into training camp. So that is the show for today. Like, subscribe, get over to Suneil's channel, So Real Sports Talk TV. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, and I will be back on Thursday for the Hammer and Nail Show. Take care, everybody.